So, Adam, I guess you can do that anytime.
Yeah, sure.
Okay.
I mean, if you want, I can do a quick demo now.
No, I think we should do the demo next Wednesday. I want more people to be able to see it and so on and so forth. So since it's only Rob and me, then it would probably not be. Well, I mean, not from the Dell side. You know, it's only the two of us. So I would like to have other people see it as well.
Okay.
Is there anything you want to talk about, Rob?
There's a couple of things. I have the agenda list that we had started. Did anybody add to it?
I didn't.
Okay. So the demo is on 9/11? Yep.
That's what it sounds like.
Okay. And so we're moving this to the Crowbar.
You're right. It will be moved to the Crowbar repo because, I think there's a better space for it. I think Adam corrected the copyright issues, and those, by the way, they don't bother me too much. Only problem is that, I think it's your copyright, so it should be added to it. But that's all. But yeah, so he's going to go and move it over into the Crowbar repo.
Cool. The next thing, let's see. First thing I had on the list was status of the Pebbles branch and pulls with it. So I can go over and we can reprioritize the list of items that I had. Status of Pebbles, Cisco UCS, sounds like you talked about it. Documentation, Havana branch, the Mesa branch, Hyper-V pull requests, and I would add to this now the RHEL pull requests. Status of the CI progress. I'm not sure we're ready to talk about that if we don't have the right people. And then Crowbar 2's updates and status. Oh, and then just the shift. If we're going to keep these meetings shifted by a week, we should resolve that. Any changes or additions?
Not from me.
Adam? I don't know. The call's showing that we've got a whole bunch of people, but only Adam is identified.
I know there's a bunch of us from our side.
Okay. Sorry, guys. There's a holiday for some of our team members, so they're out. Judd and Arcady specifically. Okay.
I've done that repository transfer. It's already in effect.
Just like that.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's very easy on GitHub.
Does that also mean that the forks get updated as well, or no?
So the forks of my repository are now forks of the Crowbar one. So in particular, the SUSE fork looks like it's derived from Crowbar, just like all the other ones, which is what we wanted.
Okay. So they update that automatically, yeah?
Yeah, it just changes the references, yeah.
Okay.
Makes sense. So the backlog of pulls for Crowbar looks pretty reasonable right now, although it's making progress. The Hyper-V, there's a couple of big classes of work in this, which is the RHEL CentOS pulls that are in there. Are you guys doing a review on that? I know that we will. How do you want to bring them in? Do you want to bring them in as a group? What are you thinking?
So I did a quick review on these, and so there were a few issues, and I think they got fixed, but I didn't do a second review after the fixes.
Okay. So that we can just work these through the normal process. We don't need additional discussion.
No, I don't think so. I mean, they are, in general, they are pretty trivial. So
that was my thinking on the review too. But, since they came in as a bulk, I thought it'd be worth discussing it. Hyper-V changes look like they've been either. I think that most of them came in. Do you know of any other?
The first batch came in, but we have 3 new put requests for Hyper-V, I think, now.
Okay.
One for Provisioner, one for Network, and one for Nova.
Yeah.
The Nova one might need some discussion because it's a bit complex. So let me just quickly explain it. Originally, there was a new bar clamp for Hyper-V that was showing, so that it was containing the cookbook for Hyper-V for really running Chef and deploying stuff on the Windows node, and it was also containing, I would say, the proposal stuff for Hyper-V, which was more or less a fork of the Nova bar clamp. And had a discussion with Cloudbase and Octavian.
Mm-hmm.
And since the Nova bar clamp now supports assigning nodes to different hypervisors, we decided to just add a new role to the Nova bar clamp, and this role would reference the cookbooks from the Hyper-V bar clamp. Because we don't want to ship the cookbooks in the Nova bar clamp because they are really huge. Like, it contains huge binary files for Windows.
Right.
So we want to keep that separate, but from a UI perspective, it should really belong to the Nova bar clamp.
That makes perfect sense.
So there's some, if you look at it, if you review it, there's a small hack at some point where we just check if the Hyper-V cookbook is installed, and if it's not installed, we just don't accept using the Hyper-V role.
Okay.
It's kind of hacky, but yeah, if there's any better idea on how to implement that, I'm happy to do that.
No, I think that makes sense. Cool. Okay. So that looks like it's rolling forward. We don't need additional discussion on it. It's good
No, I
to
don't.
see that stuff.
I think it's all fine other than that. So.
Okay. We're trying to spin up a team here that knows Hyper-V to do some test and review of it against the Pebbles branch. Although we'll talk about Havana work in a minute, and those guys will probably want to focus on Havana. Cool. This is excellent. Okay, Hyper-V. So we've got these covered. And just we're updating the Mesa branch. I know this is more of a stable branch, but there'll be some activity on it. We're updating it to the Grizzly 3. We backported the VLAN support that was already in Pebbles, and then we're going to be doing our Hadoop work off of the Mesa branch. So just as a heads up for that. So we're effectively doing just some patch releases on that. Cool. Good. Any other topics before I move to Havana and branching? Okay. So our expectation is to start work on Havana codebase using pull from source. Potentially as early as today, but I think it's more likely that it's going to be sometime in the next 2 weeks, or even in 2 weeks exactly, because that'll be our sprint boundary. There's already work going forward on Havana using the pull from source pieces, and the HA work that we've been doing is targeted, going to be focused towards Havana as a Havana delivery. And the goal for this is to be able to have Havana as a community. This is pretty typical for one of the objectives for us is to be able to deploy the current release at the summit, and so that it supports that. My expectation is that we would do that as a branch off of Pebbles. So the goal, we need to make sure that Pebbles is as stable as possible because I want to minimize merge issues. Does that make sense? Is that a reasonable approach? Yes, I'm waiting for a response.
I think that makes sense. Yeah, I mean, and I think it will coincide nicely with kind of the release of SUSE 2.0, and then a more of a break fix pull request scenario rather than a net new functionality.
Right. Well, the consequence would be I'm expecting the Pebbles branches to stabilize. Right, so less new code change. Most of the new functionality would be focused around Pebbles, and so the timing is such that I want to make sure that everything that's in flight, ideally the biggest changes in Pebbles are already in. Right, SUSE, I know you guys are stabilizing for your 2.0 release, and so structural changes should, especially the Crowbar core, should be minimal. Would be my expectation, right?
Yeah, we briefly talked about that before you were on the call, actually. So I think the expectations match up.
I'm sorry. What did you say last, Simon?
We briefly talked about that before you came on the call, and I think the expectations you would have and kind of the plans that you were laying out match up with what Adam has said.
Okay. Good.
They're going to move a little slower. There's going to basically mostly be, iterative releases and pouches and stuff like that to the 2.0 stuff. It sounds like there isn't for a while a plan to do a major .0 release, and instead move to like a more iterative approach to things. So I think that should also translate into less frantic activity on the Pebbles branch, is my guess, and is what somewhat was confirmed by Adam as well.
Okay, because what I would like to be able to do is spend a lot less time, validating and doing reviews of Pebbles. We still want to maintain code quality and stability because it should become the stable branch. But if there's still a lot of structural changes, then that's going to be harder to. We're going to be splitting effort, and that doesn't make sense. So I just want to make sure we're aligned.
Just to make sure, what kind of structural changes are you thinking about? I don't think there were any bigger changes in the last 8 weeks, like structural things. There
aren't many. No, it looks like it's been settling, which is why I think it's a good time to do this. The biggest thing that's been hanging out there is the change to add a database to capture sessions, so that pull is still hanging. We should ideally that is either agreed not to do it or it's in before we fork or before we branch. In that case, and then a lot of the rel stuff isn't really structural. Hyper-V, there were structural changes, but I think we've gotten those resolved. It looks like we're reaching a good time. I want to make sure that what I'm seeing, it matches your expectations.
I don't know of any structural changes we are planning for the Pebbles branch, so I guess we all agree on that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say even down to any significant UI changes or enhancements or things like that, we'd want to. I mean, small stuff. It's not that big a deal, but I just making sure that we're not creating divergence because when we branched Mesa, there were a whole bunch of things that have since changed in Pebbles, and so, which is fine. That's why we did the branch. It allowed progress to continue on those items. And I just want to make sure that we don't accidentally create the same situation where we have leave behind stuff that we want in the new branch. Good.
Okay.
So go ahead.
Yeah, probably the biggest change UI-wise currently is the open pull request for Quantum, the Cisco support. But other than that, I don't think there is much, and I don't think there's much in the queue from our side.
Cool. I mean, I don't think we're going to get to 0 pull requests in queue before we branch, but I'm hoping we can get to relatively close to 0, and it might make sense to either accelerate or hold pulls so we can resolve them all before the branch. It's not required, of course. It's just something to think about. Okay. So we'll announce that beforehand so people have time to do it, but I would say tentatively, sometime next week or early the week after. Any concerns?
Sounds good.
Okay. Somebody's asking, is there a roadmap for the other hypervisors mentioned in the multi-OS doc? ESXi, I believe that support was added in a recent poll, and Zen Server's been in for a long time, if I'm correct, although we don't provision Zen Server. You guys want to speak to that? Vincent or Adam?
I don't think there's anything for Zen. We have a support for that into the cloud, but it's really based on libvirt. And the cookbook itself only works on SUSE. So it would need to be ported to Ubuntu, so we could expose that in the UI upstream.
Cool. Okay. And these two hypervisors are actually standalone hypervisors. We don't provision either at this point.
So for VMware it doesn't, but for Hyper-V actually it does.
I'm sorry. Correct.
And it needs a lot of documentation, but yeah, it does.
Yeah, and sorry. Yeah, I'm glad you clarified that. Hyper-V we definitely provision as a standalone. In the chat, the question is ESXi and Zen Server, and we currently don't provision either of those. Although there are requests to do it, and I know there's community interest. So being able to do those things are definitely targets for the Crowbar 2 work. Cool, good question. And I would suggest if whoever asked the question, if you're trying to do those things, bring it up through the list or chat, and we'll see if we can help you. I'd be very interested to see you guys if there's some Zen Server capability, even if it doesn't work in the other operating systems. I'm assuming it's in. It's just not not tested on the other platforms. and Dell does not test those hypervisors. So. All right. So Mesa Branch, we talked about Mesa Branch. We talked about Havana Branch, Hyper-V, RHEL. We are still working on getting our CI infrastructure in place to do test of polls. The guys aren't here to talk specifically about it. It's still a priority for us to do it. But since it seems like pull requests, manual test of pull requests is still a pain, but the changes are less dramatic and so less risky. Let's talk about the sliding the meeting schedules back by week. Now's a good time to talk about changes if we want to change these community meetings. We've been missing a lot lately, so it's worth saying: are they still working? Is this something we want to get back into the rhythm of? My expectation is that Crowbar 2 stuff is heating up, and having a regular cadence of design review and planning and coordination on Crowbar 2 is going to be useful. And it actually looks like velocity on Crowbar overall is heating up, and having these sync points are really helpful. So unless somebody has a strong objection, I would prefer that we keep these cadences. What I would ask is that we use today as the sprint start. I know it's a little bit of a change. I hope that's not disruptive to anybody. So unless somebody objects, we'll keep the basic cadence Thursday mornings for community sprint coordination and planning coordination, and then on the alternate weeks, a design meeting where we talk about design concepts. There's a significant backlog of topics that we have, so we need to start making sure we have a prioritized list, and then we'll start knocking those things out. I'm also planning to start doing videos and docs about Crowbar 2 and how that operates, the infrastructure, building cookbooks and things like that. So that expect to see those things starting to come up. And I'll post as I post them. I'll post through the list. So all that piece will come. And as a reminder, the Crowbar 2 system has integrated docs, and so you will see that we are trying to maintain documentation in these doc directories. Somebody has a crossover beep.
Maybe somebody went on hold.
Yeah. I don't have visibility into who. So, and it's gone. No, it's not. So I'm trying to keep these docs up to date, and if people have items or anything, if they watch videos and see useful information, please let's make an effort as we start development and ramping Crowbar 2 that we stay ahead on the docs side. Certainly making sure we stay up on test and docs to match the code I'm doing. All right.
Is there an expectation that design discussion on the list is going to ramp up? Because I haven't really seen any of that recently, and I think realistically, if you want our input, that's going to be the only way to effectively get it.
That makes a lot of sense. Yes, that makes a lot of sense.
I mean, I think it's just maybe just a difference in the way we work, but generally, we're very email and list oriented, and from what I've seen in the past, some of the design calls, unless you're regularly attending them and regularly sort of hands in the code, it's pretty hard to follow along some of it. I mean, less so for me, but I think for some of my colleagues who, especially having not been involved in the design discussions in Austin when I was there, there've been discussions since then that I could follow along because I had that background of understanding, but anyone who hasn't been privy to those kinds of live conversations it's just not really practical what's going on. Whereas if you do it via ongoing discussions on the list where people are able to sort of mentally digest the information in their own time and to cross-reference it by looking at code or design documents or schema diagrams and that kind of thing. I think that way can work, but if it's just like an hour every 2 weeks where somebody hops on a call and tries to understand 2 weeks worth of discussion that's mostly happened on site at Dell, then I think that's probably not going to be as effective.
Fair enough. One of the things I'd like to see, and we need some help with, is to transcribe things that are going on in those when we have the synchronous meetings, and create reasonable leave behind. So Adam, I hear what you're saying, and we will step up efforts to make sure that we pump things out to the list and do it. One of the challenges that I want to figure out how to get past. We have the same issue on our team because not everybody's, actually relatively few people have been involved in the Crowbar 2 design of late, and so we're going to have to educate people so they have the context to understand the email threads. Right, the email threads can't completely rehash everything, so we have to build some background materials so people can understand what's going on, and then have the targeted email conversations about it. And we need help helping capture that information so people understand it.
Yeah, I mean, I appreciate it's frustrating for you guys because you're sort of working together on a daily basis, face to face, and you're able to make a lot of progress quickly by just whiteboarding stuff and whatever. And it's frustrating to then have to take extra time to to share that, to write it out on the list or document it and draw diagrams and so on. But like if you want the community to the development community to grow outside Novell, I think that's outside Dell. At least they rhyme. Then that's the only way, really.
Yeah, that's definitely something we need to do a better job at. One of the things I feel like has happened, and I know it's hard to see this in the. Hold on a second. One of the things that's been happening in the design work is we've actually transitioned over into sort of the validation of the design components. It's still almost identical to what we discussed, Adam, but I realize very few people understand that. So in the next sprint, my expectation is that our team's going to be doing an education effort, and the first thing in doing that is going to be creating the docs and making sure that we have leave behinds and those things are written down in a comprehensible way. And we'll need help to doing that. I'll post videos of training sessions I do, and we'll create as much documentation as we can as we get, and do it in a place where people have questions. We can have people come in and add and extend. One of the things that I want to make sure we do as a community is transfer those email discussions into documentation, and that's going to take a pretty broad spectrum effort.
Yeah.
But yeah, Adam, I know we don't do it, and so we need to build some credibility with this. But I agree and support what you're requesting. All right, I had one more note, and I had this in the wrong place. Anything else on the Crowbar 2 pieces? The biggest thing I would note is that from a status perspective, I was updating the Trello. We continue to make a lot of progress on the burn down. It looks like the UI pieces that are in are mostly complete, are enough to actually run the system and make it work. I'm still trying to build a complete BDD test coverage for the annealer, and that means I'm testing, basically I have to test everything to get there. And then we're actually having Crowbar 2 building a admin server and all the capabilities for the admin server, which includes installing Chef using the script jig and then using Chef to install NTP DNS, DHCP, logging, and then the networking pieces, and then that means we can finally start building up the provisioner and the deployer first, and then ultimately the provisioner. So those pieces are actually falling into place right now. The pulls are coming in to do that, and so that's why we feel like we can start training more people so the development effort can increase in velocity. That's a Crowbar 2 status in a nutshell. And then the one thing of note is just that we're trying to use Docker for some of the dev environment pieces so that we can do some more, use less resources for some of these preliminary tests. So if you're interested in that, you'll start seeing that mostly in Crowbar 2 for the Crowbar admin pieces. We're also talking to the Docker team about Havana and using Docker as a hypervisor in Havana. And one of the things that we're considering, if the integrations look good, is to actually use Docker as the default hypervisor for the community builds in the Havana release. One of the advantages of doing that is that it eliminates the need to pre-populate the glance cache, which makes the glance bar clamp much smaller if you're having to transport it. So if people aren't familiar, Docker is a LXE. It's basically an extension to LXE that adds some extra capabilities and improves the portability of containers in the LXE system. So you can treat Docker containers as effectively portable virtual machines, although they're not. And one of the things that I've been being asked about a lot is bare metal and bare metal performance and how Crowbar compares or interacts with Ironic. That's another topic for another day, but it's definitely something that I'm working out a position for, and I can certainly, as we start to document it, if people are interested, we can extend that conversation to the list, because I suspect other people who are using Crowbar are getting similar questions. Does that sound like a dialogue that we'd like to have on the list?
Definitely.
Okay. I'm getting a lot of enthusiasm around Docker because we can talk about oversubscription and bare metal performance without having to deal with all the mess of bare metal provisioning, which Crowbar is built to do, but cloud deployments aren't. Yeah. Cool. All right, that was a significant agenda. Anybody want to take time to talk about topics we didn't cover and should cover for the next week, or we can just build that up in the background?
Nothing from me. And it sounds like we were done, so we'll get together Wednesday. One of the agenda items will be that Adam will do the UCS demo. And then I guess we'll figure out what else needs to be talked about by Wednesday, right?
Definitely. What we might want to do is, if there's interest, we can see about talking about Docker on Wednesday.
Right. Cool.
Excellent.
Right. Thank you guys for joining.
All right, everybody.
See you around.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye.